Hi, friends. I know there are some of you out there that are not such a fan of therapy, and I know how that feels. I'm Larissa, the mindful dating coach, and when my parents were getting a divorce, I was the only one that refused to get therapy. Therapist was already picked, my siblings went, and I said, I got this. I don't need help. I'm good. Thanks. And I went about my life. Well, almost 30 years later, I am the only one of the three of us that have gotten divorced. And although that's not the only reason, I always look back on that and be like, I probably should have gone. Well, I'm not here to convince you to go to therapy, although I would love to share the wonderful journey that I've had with therapy. And I do toot therapy's horn all the time, but that's not for this. Right now, I want to give you 3 essential questions to essentially start your doing the work journey without having to go to therapy. So grab your piece of paper, pencil, journal, whatever you got, and I've got the first one coming. Number 1, what are the associations and the meanings and the messages that you got around the words relationship, partnership, marriage, love, male, being a man, being a woman, gender roles in general in your youth? Now, there's no judgment here. So even if it's something that you don't agree with, write it down. Think about all the different relationships you had in your youth growing up, and where you felt bad, where there was some yucky feelings, and I'm using kid language because you were a kid, right? And that's going to show up in your body like it did when you were a kid, or where you felt like, oh, that's what I hope to have someday. Well, what about that relationship made you feel that way? Get as deep as you can into this question. Probably place yourself, right? Close your eyes and imagine yourself back then and all of the different ways that they interacted in front of you. Of course, you weren't like making associations consciously, but subconsciously, you learned a lot. You learned everything you needed to know about relationships from the people in your life. And if you're anything like me, which I'm guessing a lot of us are, they weren't always healthy. Or maybe there weren't many healthy at all. So you really didn't get to see the ideal kind of relationship. You didn't get to see what you hoped to have. And you were just trying to make associations and learn survival techniques on how to have a relationship in the ways that you see it around you. So take a second and think about the relationships that you saw and what they taught you about relationships, love, partnerships, marriage, gender roles, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And even a little bonus, this is a much bigger question, but like who you were, what your surrounding adults and friends and everything made you feel about who you were. That's a big one. That can be a whole other separate question, but that's the first big question to ask. Then the follow-up to that is, do you still want to believe in those things? Do you see them as detrimental to your relationships? Or do you think that they're incredibly helpful? Does it resonate with your soul? Does it make you feel amazing about the relationships that you're building because you have that belief, right? Maybe it's the grit. Maybe it's the positive gratitude that you bring to a relationship. Or maybe it's the, constantly, insecurely watching for the ball to drop. Maybe you are, this happens a lot, right? Where you have learned that you can't trust anybody and you're constantly waiting for them to hurt you in emotional or physical ways, or you're just waiting for them to cheat. This is incredibly sad. I mean, there's so many stories of my past that I look back on and I feel like a completely different person. And I look back and I'm like shaking my head, but to be totally honest, it was probably a week or 2 after our wedding. And I remember walking into our apartment in Chicago, and I think it was out of the blue. I don't remember a conversation before this. And I just said, hey, when you want to have an affair and you want to cheat on me, can you just tell me about it beforehand so I can be prepared? Who does that? Who asks that? Anyways, I have history in my childhood. I have relationships, multiple relationships that were very crucial to my childhood. That was a very common thing, unfortunately. And I grew up thinking that was just going to happen. That's just what I should expect. And so there's a lot more for me to share, but for that one, that's my example. So write that down, write that question down, and then make sure you journal the heck out of this question, because it is going to tell you so much about the life you have right now and the future you're going to build with your future partner that you might not see coming. And it will help redirect you back to something good if you're not already there in that headspace, right? If you realize you got some really negative messages going on and some negative associations and some toxic ways of thinking about how men and women should act together, that's going to blow up in your face. In my case, 18 years after you get married, right? Or 20 years after you have kids, like whatever it is, it's going to come back. So part of this doing the work, that's starting to be the great divide in dating, right? Like I know that we've got a whole section of people that don't care about emotional intelligence, and then a lot more people than there used to be caring and really prioritizing emotional intelligence, and people that have done the work. So much so that they've asked me to like put this as like a checkbox on my little mini matchmaking platform that is a yes or a no. Have they done the work? Have they asked themselves these hard questions? Have they met with a therapist to do deep dives on themselves? So I'm trying to give you those 3 questions so that you can start this journey without getting a therapist. So number 2, how did your caregivers take care of you and meet your needs as an infant and a child, adolescent, and maybe even into adulthood? Now, it'll change a lot, but the most important thing to look back on is as an infant, the earliest stages of your development. And no matter who your caregiver was, maybe it wasn't your mother or your father, maybe it was your grandma or an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor or grandparents, whoever it is, if you can go back and kind of go back to your younger years, what was their life like? Were they really stressed out? Were they available to you? If you cried, what would they do? Would they pick you up? Would they leave you there? Were they not even home? Were you passed around foster care to foster care? What was your situation like early life? If you don't know, I would go back and ask someone. Maybe you have an older sibling. Maybe you have a parent that could answer honestly. And do some work around attachment theory. So there is a wonderfully, and really, I haven't found a flaw in it yet, except for one, which I'll share in a minute, but attachment theory is a way to, it's really a whole beautiful framework for taking how you created attachments, or the lack of attachments, right? How your caregivers cared for you and met your needs as an infant and young child, how that kind of ingrained in us our association with relationships and attachment and closeness and intimacy. And we're seeing so many of these identifying factors, like as an infant, and like these categories, the different kinds of parenting styles back then, and like moving it into adulthood. And there's so many minds that are like, what? Oh my gosh, that's totally how I feel in relationships. That's totally what I do. And it's like a beautiful aha moment when I get to talk to my clients about attachment theory and they've never experienced it before. They didn't know anything about it. And it's usually really spot on. So check it out. I'll leave a link in the comments, but attachment theory is a beautiful, easy, quick test to see where you land. There are 4 categories. About half of us are secure. We've got anxious, avoidant, insecure, avoidant, insecure, anxious, and fearful, disorganized. And they have a beautiful flow of energy, especially between a I won't say beautiful, sorry. I find it fascinating, but it's not so healthy. So the anxious and the avoidant, they have this magnetism to call each other up and really kind of torture each other, subconsciously, with the push-pull of attachment and needs and anxieties and anxious and avoidance and then fearful, disorganized. I was just talking to someone recently that was just like, we were so in the throes of love, and we really it was beautiful, and I thought it was going to be forever, and then they're just cold and gone, and then they come back, and then, so look into it, right? If you're feeling like you just can't wait for that next text to come in, and you're spinning your wheels all the time thinking about what they're doing and why they aren't texting you back, or if someone's waiting for you to text them back all the time and you're like, oh, like, this isn't gonna work. Like, they're too needy, right? If you think of that. Check it out. Check out the link in my profile or in the comments, and it'll help you explore your attachment style. But it essentially starts with you as an infant. So if you can go back and think about your young childhood, what your house was like. Was it chaotic? Did you have older siblings? Were you the only child that was left with a babysitter often? It's just so fascinating to think about how and it's out of our hands. So like the life that we had, the cards that we were dealt as an infant are playing a role in our life now. And now that you're here and you're growing in your emotional intelligence, you can't just put that aside, right? That's something that you actually can change about yourself, and you can learn to work towards a more secure attachment style, so that your relationships and the way that you approach dating and the way that you feel safe on the inside is possible. I love helping people with this one. So if you want some extra help working towards that secure attachment, please let me know. And the third question is when I feel overwhelmed in any capacity, whether it's joyful or despair, but usually trending towards the not so good emotions, how do I respond? Right? So whether or not you're in tune with yourself or your mind, and you're thinking through, oh, I'm really angry right now. Some of you aren't there, right? Some of you haven't had enough training to really get into be able to name the emotion and do all the extra fun work once you name it. Let's say that you're not even there yet. Let's just say that you have that moment where like your chest gets so anxious or tight, and like, or your arms get like tingly with rage, or you're feeling your legs, the adrenaline is pumping through you, or you get super overwhelmed in here, right? You like get overwhelmed and you just kind of shut down and you're quiet. What happens? How do you handle that? And when you do feel unsafe, maybe a little panicky in that overwhelmed feeling, what's next? What do you do? And this question leads to the very challenging situations of challenges in relationships. And so part of like doing the work, I keep doing it like this and it looks like bunny ears, but when you do the work in therapy, right, the goal is to actually there's a ton of goals with therapy, but is to help you manage the difficult situations in your life better. And no matter how great the relationship is, you're going to have disagreements. And if you don't, there's probably stuff that's not being said that's not good either. So when you have disagreements, when you're feeling really strongly, or that anxious attachment that I was just sharing about, right? You feel overwhelmed with stress and anxiety, or just nervousness, and like you're waiting and it's ruining your day. Like you feel it in your body, you just like, and then they text, and then think of the incredible emotion showing up, like, oh my gosh, they texted me. How great that feels, right? Those extreme emotions are coming from a deeper place. And although if you're not interested in doing therapy to get to that deeper place, just check in with yourself to see what it is that you get really extreme emotions for. You get extreme feelings in your body, and what triggers that usually, and then how do you respond? What's your natural way? And I'm sure it's given a different situation. If you're at work, you're going to handle it a different way. If you're at home, we tend to be a lot looser and a lot less guarded when we're with people that we care about, or people that care about us, because we think they're going to be here for us forever. And that's maybe not the way you want to handle it. So the follow-up question to this is that how you want to handle it? when you get overwhelmed with those feelings, what would you like to do? How would you like to act to create a more positive relationship with the person that you're sitting with or that you experience on a day-to-day, your boss, your coworkers, your date? You know, maybe I had a date. I really liked the guy, so I was trying to be really present, but almost every time he would take the train and come meet me after work, so Friday after work, and it was like a good 45 minutes of just him, like telling me about his work, getting really upset about something, and then just holding space for it. And I think eventually he realized that's not what he wants to do and how he wants to like release his energy and his frustrations on a date. So maybe you're doing something similar, maybe you have another outlet, but doing the work on whether or not this is how you want to respond is a really powerful part to doing the work. If you have other questions or comments, other great suggestions on important questions to start doing the work, I would love to hear it in the comments. These are just 3 essentials, but very basic ones to get you started and doing a lot of great things inside so that you can show up better for your partner or future dates. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.